According to TASS, Brazil's ambassador to Russia said a BRICS payment mechanism is feasible. This is not an official launch announcement, but a signal that the issue remains on the agenda for BRICS member states. Ambassador Sergio Rodrigues dos Santos called it one of the bloc's most critical strategic priorities. He said meaningful groundwork has already been laid and that the initiative remains a long-term focus for member states seeking greater financial autonomy. The comments come as BRICS nations continue to explore ways to reduce their dependence on the U.S. dollar in international trade, a goal that has drawn sharp warnings from Washington. The significance of this statement should not be understated. For years, discussions about alternatives to the dollar-based financial system were largely theoretical, dismissed by many Western analysts as unrealistic given the dollar's entrenched position in global trade and finance. But the ambassador's comments suggest that BRICS nations are now moving beyond theoretical discussions toward practical implementation. Whether they can succeed remains uncertain, but the intent appears serious. According to Ambassador dos Santos, substantive progress was made during Russia's BRICS presidency in 2024. He said discussions are continuing under Brazil's current leadership of the grouping. The ambassador underscored the issue's long-term significance for member states seeking greater financial autonomy from Western-dominated financial systems. BRICS has rotated its presidency among member states, with each country taking the lead in setting priorities and hosting summits. Russia held the presidency in 2024, and Brazil currently holds it. Alongside efforts to build alternative payment infrastructure, Russia and Brazil are also exploring ways to expand bilateral trade using their own national currencies. Ambassador dos Santos acknowledged that such arrangements between Russia and Brazil currently lag far behind Russia's trade settlements with partners like India and China. However, he stressed that both governments are actively working to increase the volume of transactions conducted outside the U.S. dollar. The push to trade in national currencies rather than dollars is part of a broader effort by BRICS nations to reduce their exposure to U.S. financial influence and potential sanctions. One major obstacle, the ambassador explained, is Brazil's substantial trade deficit with Russia. This imbalance complicates efforts to balance currency flows and limits the practical use of local currencies in commercial exchanges. Addressing that imbalance, he said, is essential if national currency trade is to expand meaningfully. When countries trade in their own currencies, the flows need to be roughly balanced. If one country imports far more than it exports, it accumulates the other's currency without a way to spend it, creating practical challenges for the system. These discussions are unfolding against a backdrop of growing geopolitical friction surrounding BRICS ambitions, particularly with the United States under President Donald Trump. Trump has threatened to impose very high tariffs if BRICS pushes a scheme that weakens the dollar. He has also claimed that many are leaving, but there is no independent confirmation of mass withdrawals. Trump said, "Anybody who wants to be in BRICS, that's fine, but we're going to put tariffs on your nation." He added, "Everybody dropped out. They're all dropping out of BRICS. BRICS was an attack on the dollar." Trump's approach represents a significant escalation in rhetoric compared to previous administrations. While both Democratic and Republican presidents have sought to maintain dollar dominance, Trump has been unusually explicit about using tariffs as a weapon to punish countries that pursue alternatives. This transactional approach, threatening economic pain in exchange for compliance, reflects Trump's broader foreign policy style, but it also carries risks. Some analysts warn that heavy-handed tactics could accelerate rather than slow the search for alternatives as countries seek to reduce their vulnerability to American economic pressure. In December 2024, Trump warned that efforts to create a new currency or alternative reserve framework were over. He threatened punitive tariffs and restricted access to the U.S. market for any country pursuing such moves. The message was clear. Washington would respond aggressively to challenges against its financial primacy. Trump said, You want to play that game? I'm going to put tariffs on all of your product coming into the U.S. According to Trump, after his warnings, BRICS nations began reconsidering their positions. However, there is no independent confirmation of mass withdrawals from the bloc. Trump framed his election as essential to preserving the dollar's global role. He said, I think if Biden would have, Biden, that group would have gotten elected, meaning Kamala, you wouldn't have the dollar as your currency anymore. You wouldn't have world domination by the dollar if I didn't win this election. Trump added, I like the dollar. I'm very strong on the dollar. And anybody who wants to deal in dollars, they have an advantage over people that aren't. The comments reflect the Trump administration's view that dollar dominance is a core American interest that must be defended through economic pressure if necessary. BRICS expanded with Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. Indonesia officially joined as a full member in 2025, according to announcements cited by Reuters and AP. The expanded bloc has grown significantly beyond its original members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. While analysts view this expansion as part of a broader long-term shift among emerging economies seeking greater influence in global governance, the Trump administration has largely interpreted it through the lens of strategic rivalry and the preservation of American economic dominance. The expansion represents a significant growth in the bloc's economic and geopolitical weight, though the diverse interests of member states also create challenges for coordination. The UAE's position is especially notable as it now straddles two worlds, a close U.S. security partner and a newly admitted BRICS member. The inclusion of Middle Eastern states such as Egypt, Iran, and the UAE in an expanded BRICS has raised broader questions about why long-standing U.S. partners are gravitating toward the bloc. These questions are sharpened by Trump's worldview, which prioritizes narrow American interests while downplaying traditional pillars of U.S. leadership, such as alliance building, multilateral institutions, and liberal economic norms. The UAE's dual positioning illustrates the hedging strategies many countries are adopting in an increasingly multipolar world. In his first major international trip of the second term in May 2025, Trump visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE with a focus on deals and investment. Trump's foreign policy style, centered on transactional diplomacy, bilateral agreements, and a strong emphasis on domestic economic gain, has resonated particularly well in the Persian Gulf. Wealthy Gulf states have seen in Trump a leader open to direct engagement, investment-driven partnerships, and personalized relationships that bypass traditional diplomatic channels. The Gulf states' embrace of both Trump and BRICS membership reflects a pragmatic approach to maximizing influence across multiple power centers. As BRICS debates alternatives to dollar-based systems, the resulting tension highlights a shifting global order. Economic sovereignty, geopolitical alignment, and strategic hedging are increasingly intertwined. For BRICS nations, reducing dependence on the dollar is about more than economics. It's about reducing vulnerability to U.S. sanctions and financial pressure. For the United States, maintaining dollar dominance is about preserving the economic leverage that underpins its global influence. The stakes in this contest are enormous. The dollar's role as the world's reserve currency has been a cornerstone of American power since World War II. It allows the United States to borrow at lower rates than other countries, run persistent trade deficits without facing the consequences that other nations would face, and use financial sanctions as a powerful tool of foreign policy. Any erosion of that role, even partial, would have profound implications for American influence and for the global financial architecture that has shaped international relations for decades. China and Russia say their financial cooperation is deepening and progressing. According to Chinese officials, under the joint leadership of the heads of state of China and Russia, their relationship has withstood international changes. Officials describe the relationship as building consensus on good neighborliness, strategic coordination, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation. China says it continues to advance China-Russia relations with financial cooperation as a key component. Chinese officials have outlined priorities for deepening financial cooperation with Russia. One official said, First, strengthen communication and coordination of macroeconomic policies to boost development and revitalization in both countries and support world economic stability. The official added, inject new impetus into stable global growth. These comments reflect China's effort to position its relationship with Russia as contributing to global economic stability, a framing that Western governments would likely dispute. Chinese officials say they are ready to expand cooperation with Russia. The Chinese Ministry of Finance says it is ready to work with the Russian Ministry of Finance to strengthen bilateral financial and economic cooperation. Officials say this cooperation aims to jointly advance the China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership for a new era. The deepening China-Russia financial relationship is occurring as both countries face Western sanctions and seek alternatives to dollar-dominated financial systems. Russian officials cite rankings by purchasing power parity that place Russia as the world's fourth largest economy. The IMF publishes PPP metrics in its World Economic Outlook, but by nominal GDP, Russia ranks much lower. Western economists often dispute such rankings, noting that nominal GDP figures, which do not adjust for purchasing power, provide a different picture of economic scale. The differing methodologies reflect broader debates about how to measure economic power and influence. According to Brazil's ambassador, the possibility of a dedicated BRICS payment mechanism is moving steadily from concept to reality. The ambassador described it as one of the bloc's most important strategic priorities. However, significant obstacles remain, including the currency flow imbalances between member states and the practical challenges of building payment infrastructure outside the existing dollar-based system. Whether BRICS can translate these discussions into a functioning alternative remains to be seen. Trump has claimed that his tariff warnings have caused BRICS nations to reconsider their membership. He said, everybody dropped out. They're all dropping out of BRICS. However, there is no independent confirmation of mass withdrawals from BRICS. The bloc continues to function and expand, though individual member states' commitments to specific initiatives may vary. Trump's claim reflects his broader approach of using tariff threats as leverage in international negotiations. For the United States, dollar dominance is not merely an economic convenience, it is a core strategic interest. The dollar's role as the world's primary reserve currency allows the U.S. to borrow cheaply, run large deficits, and impose financial sanctions that carry real weight. Any serious challenge to that dominance would reduce American leverage in ways that extend far beyond economics. This explains why both Democratic and Republican administrations have viewed de-dollarization efforts with concern, though Trump's response has been more explicit and confrontational. For BRICS nations, the push for alternative payment systems is about more than economics. It's about reducing vulnerability to U.S. sanctions and financial pressure, tools that Washington has used with increasing frequency in recent years. Countries like Russia and Iran have faced severe sanctions that cut them off from the SWIFT payment system and froze assets held in Western banks. For these nations, building alternatives to dollar-dominated systems is a matter of economic survival and sovereignty. The irony is that American sanctions policy may have accelerated the very outcome Washington seeks to prevent. By weaponizing the dollar, cutting countries off from SWIFT, freezing assets, imposing secondary sanctions on third parties, the United States has demonstrated the risks of dependence on dollar-based systems. For countries that may one day find themselves in Washington's crosshairs, building alternatives is not merely a matter of convenience, but of strategic necessity. The question is whether those alternatives can be built fast enough and robustly enough to provide a genuine option. The central question is whether BRICS can translate these discussions into a functioning alternative to the dollar-based financial system. The obstacles are significant: currency imbalances between member states, the practical challenges of building new payment infrastructure, and the dominance of existing systems that have decades of momentum. But the political will appears to be growing, particularly among countries that have experienced or fear U.S. financial pressure. Whether that will is sufficient to overcome the practical challenges remains the key uncertainty. The contest between dollar dominance and BRICS ambitions is likely to intensify in the coming years. Trump has made clear that he views any challenge to the dollar as an attack requiring aggressive response. BRICS nations continue to explore alternatives, with Brazil's ambassador calling the payment mechanism feasible according to TASS. The outcome will depend on whether BRICS can build practical systems that work and whether the U.S. can maintain the economic and political leverage that has sustained dollar dominance for decades. What is clear is that the global financial order is entering a period of increased contestation, with significant implications for trade, sanctions policy, and the balance of power between established and emerging economies.